Thanks for coming out tonight. We're kicking off our fall programming of Mobile Monday Toronto. How many first-time attendees are here today? Okay, great. We always seem to have a good 50-50 split. It looks like there's more of a balance between the genders, which is good. Usually we have like a 90-10 split, so thanks for coming out. Single guys are clapping. Wanted to thank the Mars team. We'll have Don Duval, the VP of Strategy and Business Services, come up and give a few words in a couple of minutes. But wanted to thank the team again for helping us with the event. So Janet and Andrea, Don, of course, Peter and Alan, always great supporters of the chapter. AV team as well, they do a stellar job. We've also been recording these events and showing them on Vimeo, so usually it's available a week later after the event, so we've developed a nice inventory of the events if you can't catch them live. We have a really interesting event today. I've been looking forward to this for a while because it's going to give a different perspective on things, and we've got a real seasoned panel between the moderator Stephanie and Charlotte and Carla and Michelle, and we're really excited about talking about issues today and career-related, corporate-related, etc. So also wanted to thank the sponsors. We seem to be building a lot of momentum in the last little while, and Mobilicity has come on board as a sponsor in addition to SAP. So thanks Cheryl and also Shannon Lester. We have our sponsorship with Miller Thomson, and I don't know if Anthony is here tonight or anyone from the Miller Thomson team. Anyone here from Miller Thomson? No? Okay. But they're a big supporter, and they're gurus around IP law and corporate law, so if you need help, they're good resources to look to. Also, TELUS and Nokia. I think Mila is here from Nokia tonight. Is Mila around? Okay, she's right in the front there from Nokia, so thank you, Mila. Rogers Catalyst, so Larry and team Rogers people here tonight. I think I saw a few Rogers people, so yeah, thank you for your support. Public Mobile, Alec and team, Anthony Lacavera and Wind, Lucas and the Redney team, BDC has just come on board. Jasmine, is Jasmine here tonight from BDC? No? Thank you, BDC. MarketWire, they're always a great supporter right from day one over 5 years, and Dundane Multimedia. We also have a special offer from BlackBerry regarding a developer conference that they have coming up in October. I don't know if it's on screen. If you just want to move the slide forward, you'll see that offer to register for the DevCon Americas event in San Fran. They've got a free playbook with registration for the event. I wanted to introduce Stephanie in a couple of moments, but before we do that, Don Duval, as I mentioned, the VP of Strategy and Business Services, will get up and say a few words. I'll introduce Stephanie, and she'll take it away introducing the panel.
Well, good evening, everybody. As Jim said, my name is Don Duval. I am the VP of Strategy and Business Services here at Mars, and it's an absolute delight to welcome you to our home this evening. It's with great pleasure that I am inviting you here tonight. For those that are not familiar with Mars, our mandate is to work with early stage science and technology entrepreneurial ventures and help them grow. And we do that through a provision of services, everything from advisory and education to market research to capital to talent, etc. But beyond that, you know, and aligning directly with the what Mobile Monday is working to do, we look to perform a convening role, bringing in external stakeholders from the community, business, policy advocates, etc., that are tied to the innovation supply chain in many respects. So it is exceptional that we're hosting you here this evening. We have an exceptional panel that I'm sure you're all looking forward to. A couple quick things I want to do. Jim did a great job thanking the sponsors, but I just want to reflect for those that are new to Mobile Monday at Mars. The amount of work that Jim Brown and Alex Basica put into this, they have full-time day jobs, as many as you know, and as the co-founder of Mobile Monday Toronto, they've done an exceptional job convening this, organizing this, finding the content, organizing the sponsors, and we're very proud to support them and work with them on that. Our Mars team has become very integrated in the Mobile Monday at Toronto, at Mars rather, team, and we're ecstatic to continue that relationship going forward. And even more exciting, just from a branding perspective, I believe the Mobile Monday Toronto chapter is fast becoming one of the preeminent chapters globally. I think there's a measure that would indicate it's the third largest. So you're part of something very exciting and spectacular, and it just goes to show that the community in the GTA and Ontario more broadly is jazzed and influenced and excited about the wireless and mobility opportunities. So I will stop talking with that and turn it over to Jim. And again, on behalf of Mars, we welcome you this evening and enjoy the rest of the season of Mobile Monday. Thank you.
Thanks, Don. Great words, and thanks for the support. As Don mentioned, Alex, myself, and Janine have spent a lot of time organizing the event, and what we wanted to do is start the event. So I'll give an intro to Stephanie, and she's our moderator, and she's been a real pioneer in the communications industry over the last 20, 25 years. And I met Stephanie back in June at a payments conference, and I was quite impressed with her background and her work in promoting communications in general, and in particular focusing on women in communications. So a little bit of her background. She's the president of the Canadian Women in Communications Group. She's worked for more than 3 decades in the industry, 15 of them as president of Canadian Women in Communications, where she started in 1996. She has a degree from Ryerson in journalism, and she worked as a journalist for 10 years. She's also worked at Rogers. She's been a VP at Atlantis Communications for corporate communications. She's known internationally for her work to promote women participation at the board level of corporate entities. She's also the past president of the board of directors of the International Alliance for Women, a worldwide organization of women's networks. She's also, we should probably talk about a little bit, but the CWC is coming out with an executive program that deals with cross-platform strategy and implementation across content and distribution, which you'll probably talk about a little bit. In 2005, she was named one of WXN's most 100 powerful women in Canada. In September 2010, she was named to the Freedom of the City of London, UK, and in November 2010, she was inducted to Canada's Telecom Hall of Fame. So everybody, a warm welcome for Stephanie McKendrick.
Thank you very much, Jim. I'm going to introduce our panelists tonight. We're going to have a good discussion. And then when I'm finished doing that, they're all going to troop up here and we'll get going on our conversation. Our first panelist, this is alphabetical order by first name, is Charlotte Burke. Charlotte has spent her career leading and operating high-growth businesses in mobile and internet. She's an advisor with the Mars Innovation and was a member of the BDC's Venture Capital Group. She's formerly a senior vice president and officer of Bell Canada, and she led the Consumer Internet Business Unit. She led Bell Mobility's digital cellular business and launched numerous wireless data services. She's also held executive positions with Asurion, Sony, and HP Compaq. Charlotte currently serves on the boards of Post Media Networks, the Ontario Lottery and Gaming Corporation, and Acadia University. She has an MBA from Harvard Business School and a business degree from Acadia University. Our next panelist is Carla Stevens-Tolstoy, and Carla is the former CEO of Vodafone Czech Republic and a veteran of numerous international telecom ventures. She's an internet entrepreneur, a co-founder and CEO of Toki.com, the world's first relationship management platform that improves relationship through interactive tools and games of play and discovery. Our third panelist is Michelle Paris, and Michelle is a consultant and designer based in Toronto, focusing on digital strategy, content, and innovation. Over the past decade, she's worked with a wide variety of organizations and academia, the public sector, and industry, from startups to Fortune 500 companies. She's the founder of and former director of the Mobile Experience Innovation Center, a not-for-profit organization dedicated to design leadership, applied research, and innovation in Canada's mobile industry. Michelle is an acclaimed speaker on mobile and locative media and design, and is a co-founder of the Toronto chapter of the Ignite Speaker Series. Her advisory roles include board and council positions with MEIC, IAB Canada, ABC Interactive, and the CMA. Her current role at Transcontinental, Michelle leads the mobile and device media strategy, and she's responsible for product, technology, content, and sales roadmaps for all Transcontinental media brands, including Canadian Living, Elle Canada, and Hockey News. I would ask the panelists to come up to the podium, to our set here. You can sit anywhere you like. Be careful you don't roll off the...
Yeah, okay.
I'll start at this end and ask Michelle. Tell us a little bit about your role in the industry and the path that brought you to it. I find it's really, really interesting. People come to jobs, different paths, and they're often different paths than they thought they were going to be on. And careers have a way of providing some very interesting surprises, breaks, and challenges. So if you could maybe just tell us a little bit about your path.
Sure. So thanks, first of all, everybody, for coming, and thanks to Jim and Alex for setting this up, and to Stephanie for moderating. So for the past 10 years, I've primarily been a designer, industrial design, goldsmithing, and then moving into interactive and digital design, primarily around new products and services and a little bit of intellectual property development. I moved into mobile specifically from a very sort of analog industrial design platform by thinking about user experience and the rise in user experience with new technologies. And I never really expected to find myself here. Like, I was very much around like paper, pencils, you know, like analog photography, etc. But the thing that it really was amazing about what was happening with technology was that the user really, it's like there's three channels. There's the user experience and what people can do and how we enable them, and then also business and the support around the technology. But it's my role has always been around trying to understand why people want to use something, what's their passion for wanting to be involved with the technology, and then of course how do you commercialize and monetize it.
So how did you make that leap from the analog industrial design world into digital? What was the mechanism that got you to make the change? And you know, did you have mentors, or was there some sort of event?
So I was, it was really one key relationship with a man named Alexander Manu, who's based here in Toronto. He's an industrial designer and strategist, and I worked with him as the lead researcher on a book called The Imagination Challenge, which was all about strategic foresight in a global economy. And he came out of the industrial design, decorative arts movement and moved into technology and innovation. And it was taking those sort of patterns of thinking around how, like, you know, when you're in industrial design, it's very much around systems of logistics, operations, where your materials come from, large-scale interactions, and transferring that over to technology. So over the course of a year, I basically had a fantastic sort of mini MBA of, okay, this is what we want to do. We worked with companies like Whirlpool, Motorola, Creative Commons in helping them enable new technologies, develop IP, yeah, all sorts of other fun stuff.
So
does that make...
Yeah, no, exactly. I think one of the things that I find in a lot of cases is how transferable skills are. Yeah. They seem like totally different areas of an industry or functions, but in fact, when you get down to what the skills are involved, they're more transferable sometimes than you think. Carla, what are you? You've worked in a lot of different places. You've worked in China, you've worked in India, Romania, Czech Republic, and here in Canada. So you have, your career has taken you to a lot of different places. And so, you know, tell us a little bit about how you started and, you know, what drove the path that you're on and how you got into all these different places.
Well, I think it was luck. that I started off in mobile, because when I went for my interview, I didn't even know what mobility was at the time, because it was still pretty fresh. And I think also, you know, I had gone to school for Asian studies, and so when the opportunity came up for me to move to China, the middle of nowhere, at age 24 I moved, I kind of jumped on the plane and left. And so that kind of started the international career of me spending a year in China, learning all about, you know, at the time, Canada didn't have GSM. So I had to fly to Singapore and learn what a SIM card was. I mean, can you imagine? I was like, what's a SIM card? I don't know what you're talking about. So, you know, it was a really great year of like just going, oh my God, the technology is so fast moving here. And then from that, I was fortunate to work for a really great entrepreneur, Charles Sirois. I've been with him since I was 24. He and Ted Rogers started a mobile fund. And so our first thing was we jumped on to China. And then they won another license in India. So then I went to India. And then they moved me to Romania, where we got a license. And I was lucky. I got to be involved in the actual bid process. So I got to sit in front of the Minister of Telecom. And I got to meet the senior people. And I got to be part of the whole concept of how you win a license. Because there's a beauty contest or there's an auction. And because Telesystem was small and we were Canadian, we didn't have ton of funds, we had to only be involved in beauty contests. So that means that you tell the government that you will provide everything they possibly want for hardly anything. And then you win. That's what happens. But unfortunately, what happens is that, like, I have to come in as the operations person and deliver on it. So of course it's like interesting because you're dealing with local shareholders, you're dealing with people that are a little bit not in your comfort zone in regards of their affiliations and how they came about their money. So that was always very interesting, to say the least. We always had lots of entertainment, midnight calls, meeting in like dark alleyways to talk about frickin', you know, things they needed us to do. You know, we couldn't ever discuss anything in the hotel because it was all bugged. So we had to meet outside, and we had code names for every single person. So we used to call somebody Kaiser Suzo. So you know what that person was like? We'd be like, Kaiser Suzo is coming over at 6 o'clock. So we had to have code names, which I was always confused and screwing up. And then I would release a real name, and then I would get in trouble by the business development guys going, oh my God, Carla, stop talking, you know? And then you'd have to be outside in the middle of the winter in Romania with dogs barking because there's stray dogs everywhere coming after you, as the business development guys are like talking French because the whole company's French and I'm English, and just pretending I understand everything they're saying and being like, And then, you know, the first time I met Charles Sirois, he spent the entire time talking to me in French. I was too scared to tell him I spoke English. So I just stood there and smiled and said, And then the other guy came in, Bruno, and said, Charles, she doesn't speak any freaking French, eh? He was like, what? I was like, I didn't want to get fired. Like, I just wanted to, you know, be on board. And then we moved to the Czech Republic, and the Czech Republic is like, as one of our BD guys says, that, you know, at least Romania, you know where to pay people off. In Czech Republic, you have no concept. So Czech Republic was just like another whole Kaiser Suzo times like 100. But, you know, it was always entertaining, always fun, always adventurous, working 24 hours, not seeing the daylight for days on end, working out of hotels, working out of crappy 2-star freaking buildings that had no bathrooms, like in China. There was literally a hole in the wall, which I would freak out the entire time. It'd be like, refuse to go to the bathroom for like 8 hours at a time. So it was like, you had to be super adventurous and just go with the flow. And if you had to get on a plane at 11 o'clock to be in India for 6 a.m., you do it without any. I spent a night in Hong Kong, just like couldn't get a hotel, and I just stayed there all night, sleeping in the airport till my flight got out to India, and that's kind of like the life. But it's adrenaline, right? It's exciting. It's different.
And you learn skills that you didn't think you'd have to acquire in the course of being in the mobile business, like code names and
yeah, I think you need it here in Canada. I just think it's a lot more underground. I'm not convinced it's not there. The politics are here, I'm sure. I was lucky enough to avoid the Canadian and American politics because I don't know if I could have survived, but it's just different politics.
Right.
Yeah, just different.
Okay.
I don't think it's any easier.
Politics and everything,
yeah,
whether it's big P or little p.
That's exactly right.
Okay, so Charlotte, how did you get into the field, and what kind of what was your route like, and What were the key things that got you moving along?
Yeah, I sort of started out as, I always said I was the accountant who had personality, but maybe not. But anyway, I at a school, I was going to work for a company called Thornmodell to become a CA. And I think mentors have always played a big role. And my father pulled me aside and said, you know, you hire accountants, you don't become one. And he goes, if you want to be successful, I came from a family, all serial entrepreneurs. I was the only person who ever had a real job. And basically he said, look, if you want to be successful, you absolutely got to learn to sell. And I said, well, I thought I'd get a CA and then I'd make lots of money. No. You got to learn to sell. So I said, well, what would you think I should go sell? And he goes, well, personal computers are going to be the next hot thing. And he goes, and there's a little company I saw an article about that was selling mobile personal computers. And I said, oh yeah, who's that? And he said, well, they're called Compaq. And so I started my career. I was one of the first 10 people to open up Compaq Canada. And so in a funny way, I think I'm back there again. So I spent about 6 years with Compaq. And in a really high growth phase. I think when I joined, worldwide revenue was about 100 million, and when I left, it was about 3 billion. So got to do a lot of exciting things. Of course, for those of you who are a little younger than me in the audience, the first portable that I had weighed about 30 pounds. So it was more of a transportable that I could barely lift at 5'2". But anyway, it looked a bit like a sewing machine that your great-grandmother had. So I still had that issue about not getting a couple of extra letters. So I decided after 6 years that I'd go back and get my MBA, and I applied to 2 schools, York and Harvard. And because I could do York and go part-time and still keep my stock options, or I could go to Harvard and spend all my stock options. So I figured if I got accepted, I might as well go do that. So I did that for 18 months, and then when I came out, it was in the early 90s, so the Japanese were going to take over the world, and all American companies were dead, so I thought I'd join Sony, and I spent 5 years running their computer business here in Canada, actually opened it up for them, and then realized that I went back to that same mentor of mine, my father, and I said, so Dad, what do you think the next big wave is? And he goes, oh, you got to get into cellular. And I said, okay, so I went to my Rolodex, so there comes the part about networking. We didn't have LinkedIn. I mostly had worked for Xerox, ex-Xerox guys, so I noticed there was one over at Bell Mobility, so I called my former boss, Tom Woodley, and I said, could you introduce me to the guy Jim Lovey over there, because I want a job at Bell Mobility. And I went in, and they had a sales job, and I wasn't that interested in it. And he said, well, you got to meet this guy, Randy Reynolds. He's launching a digital network. So somehow in a half an hour, I convinced Randy that I could take over the launch of an entire digital network, high tech to high tech. So I joined Bell Mobility to launch digital cellular, and did that for 5 years. And many of you, some of you in the audience worked with me or during that period. Pretty exciting time, same kind of time frame as some of the things that you were doing. And then Jean Monty was in charge, and he used to call me the little girl who could do numbers, which you may or may not like that, but he called me up and he said, listen, I want you to do for the broadband business what you did for mobility. So I went down and headed up Simpatico when we had 60,000 broadband customers and 600,000 dial customers. And did that for 6 years and worked with a great team of folks there, stole most of my best people from mobility. And then decided that I was going to semi-retire. So I, for about 2.5 years, worked with Don at Mars and still do. And also worked with the BDC for 3 days a week. I always felt I could do whatever they needed me to do in that time frame. Did some venture investing with them, and then joined the board of OLG and Post Media, where I met Paul Godfrey, who for many of you is still an active CEO in his mid-70s, and I thought, maybe I better go back to the corporate world again. So I did that, and now I'm debating whether that was the right decision or not, but we'll see. So I guess in some ways I've sort of always been in mobile.
So it's interesting, what I hear from all of you is there's a certain intrepid aspect to your personalities. You in each case have just kind of leaped into something, decided, whether it was within your range or not. Didn't, look through and tick every single box and assess it and do things. It was like, yes, this is interesting, it's moving quickly, I can do it, I'm going to go. And are you doing, what you thought you'd do? Like when you look at your careers, and I've always found it interesting, if you want to be a neurosurgeon, you have to kind of pick your path pretty early in life. You really have to fall into line. But I find it interesting that so many people have these great careers, very successful, but they didn't follow a 5-year plan. Like there's nothing wrong with a 5-year plan, but I think people think if I just have the right 5-year plan, I can get from here to there, wherever there is, or I can figure out what there is, and then I can take all these very well-defined steps and get there. So how has your career been different from your expectations if you look at yourself as an 18-year-old or 17-year-old leaving high school and trying to figure out where am I going to go, what am I going to study, and what am I going to be?
For me, I've never really looked more than 3 years out. It's always been, like university, okay, we'll do that, and then we'll see what happens. And it's always had that, like I'm going to focus on an area, or I'm going to work at there's a job, or there's a contract, or there's an industry, and it has to be really challenging. There has to be a certain amount of, I don't know anything about one aspect of it, so there's a learning curve. Because for me, that's the biggest thing, is that in order to stay engaged and in order to stay inspired, you have to always feel, or I at least want to always feel like I'm at least learning and improving and, kind of growing with whatever industry I'm in. But I never expected to be where I am. And I don't know where I'm going to be in 10 years either. So that's just the way it is.
And so it's very uncertain, and that's just fine.
Yeah.
It's an adventure, and look to the next move.
And I think too, in some ways, it's really hard in this industry to try and plan out, have a 5-year plan or have a 10-year plan. Where were we 5 years ago? Where were we 10 years ago in North America? It was a completely different landscape. So you kind of have to embrace the fact that you have, there's a lot of uncertainty.
Yeah. So Carla, you've been working with Charles Sirois since you were 24.
Yeah.
And so you've had a really long term, which is unusual, in the sense you've had a lot of different assignments, but you've been in sort
Yeah, I
of...
was with him for like 14 years.
Yeah. So when you set out on this, Asian studies turned communications executive, turned, political operator, spy, whatever, your job entailed. What did you see ahead for yourself, and then how did it compare to what you ended up doing?
Oh, I was always really ambitious. I always wanted to be a CEO. That was really important to me. I worked really hard. I sacrificed a lot. I was very motivated by power. I wanted to be in the senior position. I wanted to be the one making the decisions. And I thought that I would want to be in that position forever. I really believed that I couldn't imagine not being in a power play. And when we got bought by Vodafone and I was asked to stay on, I did stay on. And originally I was very excited. I was one of the only female, the youngest female among the CEO team, and the only female. So I quickly became a poster child. And I got a lot of the attention of the CEO, Arun Sarin at the time, and they really laid out for me any of the jobs that I wanted, and I was given, a few choices on job opportunities within the Vodafone network because they really wanted to bring women up in the ranks. And for the first 3 months, I was like, what, this is what I want. I want to be at head office. I want to be, running a big part of the organization. I was very power hungry and thought I really wanted that. And as I got deeper into the Vodafone network and deeper into that, it kind of changed for me. Because I realized what motivated me more was creativity and challenging conventions and doing things differently. And within Vodafone, I became very administrative. And I got very depressed because I realized that, oh my God, I don't have the same type of influence. Because when I was running stuff for Charles, I got to do whatever I wanted, basically, as long as I met the timelines and I met the goals. And the board of directors were very supportive of that. Because I reported to a board. But in Vodafone, you don't report to a board. You report to the CEO, who then reports to a board. So you don't have the same autonomy. And I had to come to a really big decision, and it was very difficult when I resigned my job there. And I had to actually explain to all of my employees at the time, I had 2,500 employees, that my values had changed. and that I had to sit down with Arun, the CEO, and tell him that I have now recognized that what I need is creativity. And I thought I wanted power, but it's not actually what motivates me. And I had to step away. And that was very difficult, and I basically was depressed for almost 12 months, second-guessing my decision, very upset that I had left such a big role, feeling like a nobody, feeling humbled, feeling like I was like nothing anymore, and that all of a sudden people had taken over my job. I was no longer the poster child. I was no longer Carla. People would frickin' return my calls. Do you mean now I'm like a nobody? And they're like, who are you? I'm like, I used to be a CEO. They're like, so? Of what? Where? You know, and I was just like shell-shocked and really depressed, just thinking I totally freaked up. And what was I thinking? I was smoking drugs. Why did I do that? And literally started to drink, which I never drank before. Then I had to sit down with my husband and be like, my life is miserable, and I'm a nobody, and I have no purpose and no legacy, and I might as well just like end it now. And he's like, okay, you know what? You made this decision. You wanted out of corporate. You didn't enjoy it. You were upset over the lack of creativity. You were always fighting with the head office guys. I didn't agree. I mean, really, they wanted to launch a new brand campaign in November. Who the frick does that in November? I'm like, I have to meet my freaking Christmas results. I was like, I'm not launching your stupid campaign. I have to meet my Christmas results. They're like, nobody says that to us. I'm like, oh, I do. I say that to you. I'm not launching your campaign. It's a stupid campaign, by the way, because like the Mayflower, nobody knows that fly, and it dies after 24 hours. So after the Brits were like, she's a bitch, I was like, I am. And then, you know, it was really difficult. And then I went back and started my own business, which is now. And it's been a really great experience, humbling. It's different. It's not the same prestige. People don't frickin' return my calls like right away. I have no secretary that I can rely to. I have to pretend I am the secretary and be like, oh, my secretary will get that done for you. I have to do that, you know. And, you know, kind of not getting paid and putting money into a new business. So, but I guess my husband would say that I'm a happier person because at least I'm creative. And I'm not stuck in meetings for 12 hours a day.
So you had a real war between what you thought was
Yes.
what drove you, but in fact, it was the autonomy, not the power that you had.
It was the autonomy and the creativity and the independence, and I didn't want to be in administrative meetings, and they gave me like a promotion saying I get to like run like a group that's going to pick our new billing system for all of Europe. I literally, that was like killing me. I was like, what do you mean?
That's
They're
the
like,
plum assignment.
Congratulations, Curly, you got to be the head of the steer for the new billing system across Europe. I was like, oh my God, no, I'm not the one for you. I am not the one. Don't give me that.
So it's an interesting dichotomy about what you think a job says on
What
paper.
you think you want
and
versus when you get it, yes.
And day to day what that looks like. Charlotte, how about you? I mean, you've mentioned you thought about retiring. You've thought then you rethought retirement, and it's a conversation I know that a lot of my peers are having. When's the right time to step away? Is there a third career? And it involves a lot of, you know, difficult decisions because, you know, you have choices, you have opportunities, and trying to figure out, do you really want to take them or stay in them? Tough.
Yeah, I think a couple of sort of threads that come to mind when just the way you put that is that when I think about everything I did in my career, it was always about growth businesses. Mm-hmm. You know, I aspired to be an entrepreneur, but I was third generation, so maybe I didn't have the balls to be one. But so I was that, you know, intrapreneur, right? So give me a big task, I'll build the team, and I think, you know, a lot of it for me was my definition of it was about building the business. And I think one of the things that I recognized when I was, you know, sort of doing all the busy things that I was doing was that there was one element missing. And if I could do it over again, I now know it, so you're going to laugh. But I actually, you know, went through some leadership. I think I've been assessed 1,000 times. I'm generally pretty consistent, but this particular one came back and it said, you know, these are all the things you should look for, and they were, you know, consistent with what I'd always done. And then there was this funny sentence right about in the bottom of what I should never, ever do. And it said, you should never, ever take a job where you work by yourself. And anybody who knows me knows somebody had to tell you that. And so, you know, I think for me, the big piece of what I loved doing was actually building the teams, not the company, right? In the sense of, you know, the result was the company results, but the part that was fun was actually working with everybody, the social element of it. The results were the measurement. And so it's given me a new lens in thinking about where I want to go forward, because you know, whether I go back to another corporate gig with a bunch of raving lunatics, and believe me, I met a number of them recently, you know, whether I go that way or whether I continue to build on what I had done when I was in the laughable semi-retirement stage, it'll be really important for me to make sure I surround myself and engage a lot with people, because that's what I really like doing. I really like, you know, I had so much fun this year. I was one of the mentors with Next 36. I never forgave Dawn for giving me 3 teams, though, and plus I took a full-time job. But just, you know, the energy you get off of these young folks and the learning you get out of them, right? Because you sort of get a little, you know, sort of old and dated when it comes to technology and all that stuff. So for me, it'll just be a big piece of making sure that I stay away from my home office, because I implode there, and then I make impulsive decisions to go join the 5th in position of, you know, wireless operating systems and think I personally could change that. So yeah.
So it's interesting too that, you know, learning on the job is probably something we all do, but we always think of it as, oh, I can become an accountant or I'll take a marketing course. But what I hear actually really consistently is it's hard to actually put your finger on what is that thing that drives you, and the assessments you can have. How many, you know, you had a gazillion assessments, and that there's one that says, you know, a real truth to you about how you work. And I think it's an issue that's particularly, I don't know that it's just women or if women are just more sensitive to that, because I know that with our membership, there's a lot of discussion around jobs and how you move on and kind of how a job feels, not just sort of what you're doing strictly or the power, I love your power-hungry analogy. You know, you think you want to be in charge, you think you want things, and sometimes I know someone who was, you know, got into a corporate setting and said, man, this is for me, and loved that whole thing. Didn't matter where she was, she did different things. She did the routine thing, she did the other thing, she just thrived in it, and she didn't think she would. She was in a professional practice before. So it's really interesting to see, you see it go both ways, where you catch fire with something. What have been the things that have been challenging? And I think, you know, in terms of being women in an industry that is often predominated by men, or certain departments or certain functions, you know, has that been an issue for you? And if it has, you know, how does it work, and how did you get past it? Because you've all succeeded, so clearly if it was an issue, it's something that you managed.
For me, it's I can't actually comment on it. Like I feel like where I've gone in my career so far, and where I'm hoping to go as well, is that like it hasn't been an issue for me, and that comes from a very privileged place. And it's not to say that there hasn't been like gender imbalances around me. Like I look at the company that I'm at now, and you could, like there are definitely things around it that you would want to change, and it's like that with probably many companies as well. But I've been lucky enough that I've surrounded myself with really fantastic people that have acted as mentors and supported me to go on to the next thing, whatever that ends up being. You know, it's kind of lucky. A lot of it, I think, is just luck and being in the right place at the right time.
So it hasn't necessarily been a big factor.
No.
What about you, Carla? In amongst all different cultures, as well as, you know, being in a...
You know what, I've been very fortunate. I've been around very open-minded people in my time. I have not experienced any type of chauvinism, but I also think that I've been very flexible and agile with the situation too. I mean, you know, we would have board members that were French, that were Italian. You know, when you see them, you give them 2 kisses, and that's, you know, you can't see that as a problem. I mean, Charles kisses you, you know, 3 times every time you see him. You know, and we had one shareholder who was totally hilarious out of France. that was one of Charles' good buddies, and he would like frickin' pat you on the butt. Like, you can't say much. You're like, okay, whatever, thanks, buddy. Like, whatever, I'm just going to produce the results. But that's not because he sees me as less. He's French. That's the way he is, right? Like, you can't help that. You just have to, you laugh it off, you know? You know, I've spent a lot of time with a lot of CEOs of really big telco companies, from Arun to Charles, to many, because I've traveled around the world meeting, you know, lots of very senior people in telco. And you know what? I've never once had a CEO ever say to me that they don't think that women deserve a place at the senior role. If anything, they would try to get me to help them to recruit more women and to ask how they can get more women. Because, you know, one thing that men have always said to me, because, you know, at Vodafone, I was the only female CEO, and there was 22 of us. So I was always around the guys, and at TIW, I was also the only female CEO. And on all the conferences, I was always the only female, but it didn't bother me. But they would all say, you know, we think women are better multitaskers, we think they try harder, they're great assets, but we can't get them because they make life decisions that take them out of the game. And I think that's really important. I didn't take maternity. I took 2 weeks off, and I actually had a stroke while I was pregnant and while I was running the company. I basically worked from my room after I had my stroke. I assured all the shareholders that I would be up to par and not to concern themselves. I would check myself into the hospital on Friday night, come out Sunday night, be back at work Monday, work freaking crazy hours. My husband, you know, was just totally, you know, not happy about the situation, right? Because he was like, oh my God, you know, can you stop? But I was relentless. And I think, you know, I had, on my executive team, I've had, you know, probably about 25 executives over my years, maybe 30. I would say like 40% of them now are CEOs of telco companies. And the rest of them are in very senior positions, whether it's Telenor or Vodafone. My team is very senior. My old guys headed up Wind here as the executives, and then they left, of course, for obvious reasons. But anyways, so I think with that, and I had women on my executive team. I was 50-50 as a company. But you know what? My women, you know, like gay, childless, or one child, or if they had more children, they didn't freaking get defocused. And they would have a stay-home husband, and I could count on them. I wasn't gonna put up with them friggin' leaving at 2 to go take their kid to the frickin' appointment. Like, they had to compete with the male in the room, and I had to get results. I had to make sure we met the business needs. So at the end of the day, the fact that they're moms doesn't play a role in the workforce. And the fact that I was a mom who had a stroke didn't play a role either. Do you know what I mean? And I carried on because that was my commitment to my board. So I had many women, but business came first. And that's the same thing I expected from my men. It was no different. I didn't treat the men and women any differently. My current company right now is actually 70% women. Mm-hmm. I love women. I find them more detailed. All the men executives, I like them being a little bit metrosexual. They would be like a little more emotional, a little bit more in touch with their stuff. I'm a big promoter of women, but I've always been good at engaging women that were very career driven. So I've never felt the prejudice, but I know that other women have mentioned it, but you have to sacrifice as much as a male would.
That's interesting because there's a lot of debate about that. A lot of debate about, you know, work-life balance, which I think is a kind of a bad term because
Can't do as an executive.
It's hard to balance. But you know, someone has to have children for the good of society, and someone has to do our part, populate the world. We're not into reverse population growth yet, but no, it's an interesting one because what we're finding, and as we do work in this area, is that there are more men who want some balance, and it's an interesting thing. If you have the business set up in a certain way, and there are some businesses that are much harder than others to accommodate different things, but you know, for some people and for some men, I think that's too hard. And I think
Yeah, and
it's,
not everybody could be an executive, right? That's what I say to everybody. You know what? When I talk to the room and they all want to be executives, I go, really? Okay, well, let me tell you what an executive's day is. They friggin' live for their BlackBerry. They're up at 6 a.m. checking their emails, and they're available 24/7. Like, that's my entire life. I mean, my guy would be in Australia, and he'd call me, and it didn't matter. We'd be in China. They'd call at 2 in the morning. Like, do you think Charles and Bruno cared a crap that we were sleeping? They'd be like, hey, listen, we want a status update. You had to be available 24/7. If I wasn't available, somebody else would do that. It wasn't about sex. It was about how much are you willing to commit. And if you want to be an executive that does well, gets paid well, earns their keep, it's got to be your life. And if you don't want it to be your life, then maybe you shouldn't shoot for that level
right.
and that income.
So, Charlotte, would you agree with Carla's assessment?
Maybe not quite so extremely, but which is unusual for me. I'm used to being the extremist, but so here, maybe I grew up with a sort of unusual role model. I was the fourth woman in my family with a business degree. So I had three. As a matter of fact, I was in my 20s when my great-grandmother passed away, and watched her run a chain of 6 motels. Back in the, the drive the car up to the little old motels type thing. And, she had 4 kids, and my grandmother had 5 boys, so I was frequently beat up by them. So it sort of to the earlier point, it never occurred to me that I wasn't anybody but a business person. And I think also from a career perspective, I may have made a lot of changes and ebbs and flows, but it was never a debate I wasn't going to be in business. As a matter of fact, I spent the first decade apologizing because I wasn't an entrepreneur, and I had actually a paying job. I'd never get rich with that. But here's what, just to flip over, in terms of, there are some differences, I believe, for women. And I'm hopeful, and I'm glad to see that there's both men and women in the room, because I think the generation that follows me, and maybe 2 generations now, because I'm getting that old, but is that women compete with women when they're young. It's the whole dating scene and all that kind of stuff. And so in my generation, you were less likely to network within the corporation. And today everybody says it's important to have a mentor. But some people think, oh, well, I want a woman mentor. No, you want a freaking talented mentor. It doesn't matter what they are. And you need more than one, and you need different ones at different stages in your career. And in this volatile economy, or if you're shifting companies, I mean, I was speaking at a conference about 6 months ago, and I asked how many people in the room when they graduated, thought they were going to be with the same company. Well, you could just go shades of gray for the answer, right? That'd be the hair color gray. And so when you're moving and you're changing and the world is dynamic, building up that network's critical. And I think because in many cases, men had professional, and again, I'm going back a few years, but had professional parents or professional dad, they got a lot of that advice early. And I did find within, especially in a big company like Bell, that the guys were really pretty well connected. And let's face it, you guys all go to the bathroom standing up. We all go into rooms and close the doors, okay? So even those informal opportunities to share stories and, come out of the boardroom, and that guy was an asshole in the boardroom, yeah, well, I would have done this and I would have done that. We got to yell between the walls to do that, right? So I do believe it's for all of us, both the guys in the room and the women. I can't emphasize enough how important that reaching out and mentoring and reaching out and networking. And I know we talk a lot about it these days, but I see men still way more aggressive at it. Go on and look at your LinkedIns and look at how many connections the women have versus how many connections the men have. It's right there in the numbers. So anyway, I just think that all of us have a responsibility to be there to mentor and help and give back, because the people who gave to me 40 years ago or 30 years ago or even yesterday, I got to give forward for them, because they put me where I am today and helped me when I was making those wrong decisions. Sometimes I forgot to ask, like the last one, but I'll ask this time a lot of times before I go to the next one. I think there is challenges from that perspective.
And I think what you're saying too is that you know, you have to have your network, and your network includes mentors, people who will guide you, and people who will talk to you and give you the advice that you need to, you know, if you want to be in a real high demanding role, you need advice about how you need to organize yourself and how you need to deal with it. And I think one of the things that's being identified now as well is, and it's not just for women, but I think, again, women are perhaps less adept or less used to finding mentors and sponsors. This is the new word. Someone who will not just sort of give you advice, but will actually go to bat for you, who will propose your name for, you know, different, if the job comes up, who will actively kind of promote you, if you will, from a role of knowing your strengths and weaknesses and being very clear about them. So it's interesting that comes
There's
up.
one other thing, sorry, I don't mean to
Yeah.
go out of turn, but there's one other thing I would really also emphasize is have a great partner. And it's hard to have two people in the house going for the biggest job in the mountain.
Yes.
And I've had the most supportive spouse, and I only had one child, but during the peak, wickedly bad days of the teacher's buyout and all that shit at Bell, I mean, he was the parent.
Yes.
And you know, he works for a bank, he doesn't take his job home at night, and you know, he doesn't travel. And if you want to get, you know, 1, 2, or 5 kids to school, you can't have 2 CEOs in the same house. And if you do, and you outsource it to 5 caretakers, I'd question why you ever entered into the proposition of being a parent in the first place. And you do need the support system. I mean, God, get a friggin' person to clean the house, even if it's every day. Like, what are you doing cleaning the house? And you're making, you know, hundreds of thousands of dollars. And I see so many friends where they're doing all that shit, and you're going, get the infrastructure in place, right?
I would say that I'm great
So,
at my infrastructure.
anyway.
I say that to all the women. They'd be like, oh, I'd be like, you have a housekeeper, right? I'd give them the checklist. All these things have to be done. When my husband doesn't support it, I'm like, you know what? Frickin' get a new husband or get your frickin' people in line.
Absolutely.
Sex with them, okay? Don't worry about the rest, okay? Just get the frickin' housekeeper and the childcare. Get to work here.
Well, yeah, because you think about like how much your time is worth, right? And do you really want to be spending it cleaning a toilet
But a lot of them
versus,
were stubborn and wanted to do it all,
Yeah.
and I was like, don't do it all. You're kidding yourself. Don't do it all.
That's a really important point.
Yeah.
And I think that it also speaks to that, you know, in terms of balancing your career, trying to understand, you know, what choices you're making when you make them and living with your choices, and whether it's in the kind of partnership that you have and being able to talk through whose career is going to be forward. You can balance it depending
have
on
to
what
take
kind
turns.
of, you have to take turns, or you need someone whose job is more predictable, you know, as you say, doesn't travel, different kind of job, because it is
Like
difficult.
all my VPs, all the husbands stayed at home. They were all
It's an
stay-at-home
interesting
dads.
model,
They
you
were,
know.
like, they were all stay-at-home dads, and that was just the situation. Do you know what I mean? Because don't forget, they would come overseas for the job. If they had kids,
Yeah.
they couldn't take care of the kids and do an overseas assignment, so the husbands would stay at home. So we had mostly stay-home husbands or single females, but mostly stay-home husbands.
And so you have stay-at-home spouse, whether it's a man
Yes,
or a woman,
that's
where
right.
it's impossible for the partner.
That's right.
And it makes it very difficult. I guess I'll just, we're going to open up for questions in a minute or two, but just quickly, what's the most exciting thing happening in wireless today, and how do you think it'll affect the industry going forward? What really excites you about what's happening? What is the thing that really...
There's too many things to think about.
Well, I think for me, I love the fact that, I mean, it's a lot more advanced in Europe, so we're a little bit behind here in some of this stuff. So some of the stuff just happening here, we'd already done, 5 years ago. But for me, I think it's the fact that mobile and internet is coming together. And I think it's amazing that Google's making a play and that Microsoft's making a play with Nokia. I think it's really exciting times right now that everything's merging and that there's a lot of opportunity. And I think that's really, really exciting right now to see that happen.
I think for me, it's the networked environments. Like, it's not just content devices, it's not just computers, it's everything having sensors, everything being able to talk to one another, and you being able to talk to it no matter where you go. And in some places it works really well, like transportation systems in other cities is a fantastic example. Yeah, that's the thing that excites me.
Okay. Charlotte?
Mobiles, you could just go on and on and on, especially to a room like this since we're at Mobile Monday. But I think the most exciting thing about mobile is that it changes by the minute. Who would have predicted that Android would have 30+% share 18 months ago? Who would have predicted that the company that had 55% share, I don't even want to try to name the single-digit number that company's now at. I mean, this is an environment that's highly changing. I think of what's happened in just the app community in Toronto in the last 24 months, and the amount of innovation and the amount of change. And, we all hear about the consumer side, but the enterprise side is changing completely. I mean, now it's bring your own device to work, and what are the implications of that from a management perspective? I mean, before you just got mobile device management from RIM, and yippee-yi-yay, everybody was safe. And now that's all changing because it's a very fragmented industry sector moving really, really fast. And I mean, from your perspective, just the phenomenal, we don't see it in North America, but parts of the world that, people couldn't even access books, and they couldn't communicate, or they drove on a pony 100 miles just to use a public phone that was lined up only once every 4 weeks. Or, I mean, just the transformational aspect. I mean, I think the years of North American innovation are just going to get whipsawed by some of the emerging countries and I'm not, just talking Europe. Europe had its GSM era. I'm talking about places that you'd be shocked about how many people even live in these places. And so the globalization that mobile brings is, just completely exciting. And I think Canada's in a really unique place. We might be small, but we're so diverse, we're so safe, and we're so well educated that, I encourage anybody in the room who's, a few years younger than me is just get the hell on the plane and go travel the world. And honestly, bring it back home, because you can get a software development shop here that can develop in 30 languages. And but you got to understand what you're developing for, because this is not where the true crazy innovation is happening. It's happening out there in a whole new world that we haven't seen.
Wow, good advice. So I think we're going to open it for questions. If there are any questions from the floor, and I see that there's a mic there. We've got a question?
So, hi, my name is Mike. So you were talking about mentoring and finding somebody who would help you along through your careers, and oftentimes it just sort of happens, somebody, you find Alex, and you find Charles, and whoever the case may be. And I guess I just wonder, the world is becoming a lot flatter, companies are becoming a lot smaller and more agile. What recommendation would you have in terms of people going out and making that first connection and finding that mentor and trying to work through? Sometimes it's sheer luck, sometimes it's sheer just going out there and being a bit of a ball buster and introducing yourself. Any thoughts on that? Because it is a different world, and finding that mentor is absolutely critical for everybody out there to help them along. Just curious if you have any thoughts, looking back in retrospect.
Determination as well. Like I know that there are certain people that that have mentored me, and it's been, well, do you want to go for a coffee? Do you want to meet? And it's like always, okay, let's just try to get a conversation going to see where that conversation will lead. But it's, you kind of have to call every day and say, hey, I'm 22, will you come and have coffee with me, please? And just being really, really determined to start a relationship and see where that goes from there. And also being really clear about what, if you can be clear, what you want to get out of that relationship.
There are also programs that, there's the formal and informal mentoring. There are programs that have, some of them are virtual mentoring where you go online and get...
But, my own experience has been is that the people and the internet and Facebook and social networking has sort of destroyed people's willingness or comfort zone to go out and to talk to somebody face to face, and defining that mentorship relationship, unless you actually talk to somebody, unless they connect with you, I think it becomes dramatically more difficult. So just a thought. I mean, that's
Unless
what I say.
What I'm saying is a program where people agree beforehand to be mentors, and they just, sometimes
I think one of the things is that, it's not so easy to find people to mentor. You think there'd be people lined up at your office. There's not. You usually mentor someone that has that spark, that desire to be mentored. Because the first thing is, I call it the KDST boot camp. You want to go through my boot camp? Welcome. But I'm going to beat the shit out of you, and I hope you come out alive. But at the end, you're going to be really good, and you're going to have a great job. You might be a CEO one day. You might move up to be one of my executives. But there's a lot of people that like kind of want to do it on the surface, but they don't really want to jump right in. And, you know, I had to expose myself. I mean, I got beat up, so I can't even tell you how many times I've been beaten up. I've been beaten up so much that I've been, like, locked myself in a closet crying, thinking, like, I am so fired. Crying, hysterically, thinking, I am so screwed, I'm just going to be fired. And then I come out, and that same person that beat the crap out of me is there to pick me up again and say, you know what, I had to teach you a lesson because you were way too cocky. And who do you think you are? And then I had to humble myself, and I've been humbled 100 times, and I've been beaten up 1,000,000 times. And so it's really hard to find that person that's actually open, because people want to be mentored in like a nice way. There's no such thing. Mentored means you got to take the good with the bad.
Yeah, thank
Question?
Thank you, Carla, for that. First of all, thank you for the entire panel for being here. And I actually wanted to take this chance to say thank you to Charlotte, because she was actually our mentor for the next 36. And whenever Charlotte was on the phone, if she talked, you listened, you took notes, and you went back, revised your whole plan, and came back to her next week. So thank you for your time.
Thank you.
But I wanted to ask today, because we talk so much about the opportunities in mobile. Everybody knows it's the next big thing, or it's already here, and the iPhone 5 might be announced tomorrow. But what are some of the challenges and the opportunities that we're missing? Because everyone's walking around with a phone, everybody's talking about apps, but I feel like there's something that we're not looking at and we're missing. So from your perspective.
Hey, if I knew that, I'd be, I wouldn't be here. I wouldn't be here networking tonight. I'd be off calling you guys to get in a, you know, sort of quiet room somewhere so we could build a new company. But you know, just to that point, though, I mean, there are millions of opportunities, and I think another thing that's important, though, is when you pursue something, you actually have to have an interest and a relevance to it. It's got to either, not to say you've got to wake up and want to save the dolphins or whatever. It's not so much a passion in that regard. It's a connecting of the dots in terms of something that you're doing in either professional or personal life, that suddenly you start to think of a business idea or something you want to contribute to the world or whatever. These things, you know, you can't just chase something because you saw it on the top 10 list, right? It's about having the passion because you believe in it. Most successful entrepreneurs, particularly grassroots entrepreneurs, started because they had something they really wanted to accomplish. And those are usually the ones that make it to the next level. And if they're not, if what they wanted to accomplish wasn't necessarily a business function, then they wrap themselves around with business advisors. But it's hard to get an idea advisor. You need to generate your own ideas.
And I think a big part of whatever that motivation is, it has to be fun. And like, fun is not always going to be like, yay. Fun is going to be like really shitty slogging through crap that you wish that you never had to do, and it's 2 o'clock in the morning phone calls, and it's the stuff
2 o'clock in the morning
that you like, oh my God, this is the most awful thing in my entire life that I have to do right now, but it's fun. And that's the way you have to keep thinking about it, is that this is the most awesome thing you've worked on, and because otherwise it'll just kill you. Like there's no way you'll do it. Yeah.
That's so true. Well, there's 36 of us still working on that, so we'll let you know when we find the next one. Thanks.
Good. I guess what you're saying too, Michelle, is the 99% perspiration doesn't get you far if you don't have that 1% inspiration and have that idea. Question?
Okay, so most the comments are very much appreciated, and they were very good stories about how you got to where you are in wireless. I don't know you guys, but I've been at MobileMonday for a long time, and I've had 3 companies over 25 years, sold 2, buried 1, hired thousands of people, a lot in software and mobile. And my question is, what is the one thing we can tell our daughters and our nieces and our neighbors to get them to be in this space, to be hired? Because I'd hire more women over the years if I could. But the honest thing is 9 out of 10 aren't. And this is a really important space to grow the economy locally. So what can be done to get more women in the space?
I don't mind starting with that one. We spent a lot of time thinking about this because it's a real issue. I think that you know, what you have, a lot of the qualities that you've seen today in our panelists are the ones that are required for any kind of business. resilience, the kind of go-get-it attitude, determination, you don't give up. But I think there's a real problem that we see in our work at CWC in terms of what women think technology jobs are, or jobs through, even mobile, wireless. And they underestimate their ability to deal with technology, and they want to, the thing that makes them good at details, people who are good at details and like to be conscientious and tick off the box, sometimes are too conscientious. They want to tick everything off before they go ahead, and you have to take risks. Not stupid risks, but you have to be comfortable taking risks and failing. And I think that the message, if there's anything, is the opportunities are so great, it's worth it. You need to check them out and you need to get involved. And I think that's where sort of the sponsoring, mentoring, just that reaching out. Charlotte talked about it, you all talked about it. Reaching out to people and saying, here's something I really think you should consider. Let me introduce you to a couple of people. And, I think those things can help, but it's not a very big scale.
It sounds crazy, but some of the programs that we did, because we wanted a lot of the women in the business, because when they had grown up with communism, and I don't mean to be prejudiced right now, but the men were very one-dimensional. Because in communism, they taught you to kind of be like sheep a little bit, where the women had to be in communism, but they also had to take care of the house. So they were better multitaskers by nature. So we wanted more women in our business in Romania and the Czech Republic, because they actually were faster at picking things up. So we had to launch programs about teaching them how it's not bad to hire people to clean your house, how it's not a negative to have someone help you with the kids, how you don't have to rush home to make meals, and providing a lot of tools for them, whether that be as part of your benefits program. We allowed cleaning to be a benefit, to get your house clean. We also had meals that could get delivered to your house as part of our benefit program. So we actually designed our comp and benefit programs aligned to the women and what would make their life easier at home. So we did those types of things. We actually brought in groceries sometimes, that they could pre-order groceries. They would come into the kitchens. People could pick them up so they didn't have to go out to do their groceries. So we actually developed programs so that they would have less stress at home and they could focus more on the business.
That's an enlightened policy question.
It's a comp and ben, because you have to, who's your customer? Comp and ben is who's your customer.
Exactly.
Right? If it's moms, and if it's wives, what's going to make their life easier? Not a freaking extended dental plan right then, right? You're going to be getting somebody to come clean your house.
Well, and I think there's two other things too, to your question, is just to introduce them to as many amazing people as possible, whether they're men or women, but in the field that are doing, that are building awesome products, that are developing really fantastic software, that are scientists, that are researchers, that are just to expose them to the possibilities. And then the second thing is too, they're going to be, it's about managing your fear and about managing whatever your expectations are, right? You're going to be terrified for most of the time. I'm terrified most of the time, but it's about how you act and manage that fear. And you know what? You just suck it up. And there's a bit of character building that goes along, quite a bit of character building that goes along with that. But I think it's okay.
Do any of you have an engineering degree? Computer science?
I was lucky. No.
Bachelor of Science?
She seems like the real brainiac here. No, I'm not the brainiac.
But you.
No, I just couldn't spell, so I had to take accounting.
Accounting?
So, I had accounting, which obviously lent itself well to business. And I literally took accounting because I can't spell, because we didn't have spell checks when I had to take, you had to handwrite your exams. Not a technical. What I would say, and the best advice I ever received in terms of mentoring in a young age, and you asked about what do we tell our daughters, is it starts at the first and foremost fundamental thing, which is, I like the idea, get them to meet as many people. Today you just get to see the world in so many colors because of the amount of media that we have and so on. But is encouraging leadership, because at the end of the day, it's about whether you can lead. Back to my father saying, can you sell? Look, you could get stuck. He used to have a saying, there's people who have one hand up and there's people who have there's people who have both hands up and they're talking about everything they're doing. Well, if you've got both hands up, you're talking the whole time, you're not getting anything done. And then there's people who have both hands down and they're doing all the time, which means that they don't get recognized. If you want to be successful in life, Charlotte, keep one hand up and one hand down. I got to tell you, I kept a lot. This one was strapped to the table, but because I wanted both of them up. You know, I think you really encourage kids for building confidence and leadership and the things that keep you, you know, wanting to take risks. And if you've got yourself you know, I've got a child who has a little bit of my personality, and, you know, so trying to keep her focused on studying is very hard. So I really focus on making sure she does everything in leadership, because I know she's not going to win through marks. And so, you know, but if you've got a brilliant kid, then, you know, try to channel them to the right places. I mean, you're not going to, you know, probably don't want them to be a car mechanic. You want them to, I mean, if it's the same skills as being, you know, whatever on the technical side. So, but on the other hand, if your kid is, you know, wants to be a musician, then for God's sake, encourage them to be a musician, you know, because that's about confidence. And I've seen, especially starting in the computer industry, there were no people that had personal computer industry experience. Those of us who started at Compaq, one guy was, you know, used to play in a band. The head of marketing was former, you know, Bachman Turner Overdrive drummer. The person, and you know what they, like all diverse backgrounds. One guy came from banking, hated banking. When we all came together, it was about the excitement around a new industry. And that diversity on the team made us think about things in a lot of different ways. But what we had as a common thread was confidence and ability to take risk. Yeah. So that's what you want to breed into your kids, is confidence and ability to take risk, right? And so anyway, I don't think you know, great if they can get the technical degree, but that's not the gate.
I think it's also, just to close out on that, it's not the degree. People think, oh, I didn't take computer science, so I can't, you know, work for a computer company. It doesn't work that way.
No.
It's more transferable.
I'm an English major and I'm dyslexic.
You're an English.
So there you go.
Bachelor of Fine Art and Goldsmithing. Like,
Fine art and goldsmithing.
As
That
far
is
away that you can get from the industry as you could.
Yeah.
Like,
haven't heard that one before as a, if you want to go into technology, get a fine arts degree in goldsmithing.
I think you can kind of make it work if you have a passion. And, you know, like, you know, being dyslexic was hard, and it drives my husband crazy, and he's here because I always screw up numbers and B's and D's. You know, but from that, I never read cue cards. I improvise if anybody has me read, because I can't say big words. I can't pronounce them. So I have to be very agile. So I had to do a lot of public speaking, and when they would put a slide up that would have a word, I would have to quickly in my head find a new word, because I know I couldn't pronounce it. And I think it's just a matter of like, okay, you know what? That's okay, you know. And it took me a while to even be open about being dyslexic. And, you know, my husband's very good because it drives him insane, can I tell you? Because he can't believe I can't spell and I can't read and I can't pronounce anything. Like, I can barely speak English. It drives him insane. And living in a foreign country, I got away with it because they just figured that I was Czech. So I didn't have to spell anything right. You know, it was really great, you know.
So I love the BlackBerry, because just get
That's right. You just be like, I don't know what I'm saying. Sorry, it's the keyboard screwing up.
Yeah.
But that's why I think, you know, you just got to go for something that's important to you.
Keep your eye on the goal.
Yeah, keep your eye on the goal.
Two more questions, and then we're going to have to break to do informal networking. So at the front.
Oh, she was actually first.
Okay, at the back.
It's a very woman thing to do, thank you. So ladies, my name's Karen Schulman-Dupuis, and I wanted to let you know that in the vein of networking, I will be reaching out to all of you on LinkedIn. And to also thank you truly for one of the most balls out, no bullshit panels I've ever had the pleasure to experience. Quite literally. It's very refreshing. And in that vein, I'd like to get your feedback, and I know this might be a little bit of a touchy subject, but how do you feel about women in technology groups or women networking groups or women leadership groups versus expanding yourself into just the kind of greater realm? Because obviously your stories very much come from a place of, you know, not aligning yourself with either your major or your comfort zone. You've come from a place where you've really broadened your horizons. You've really stretched yourselves. I mean, Carla, you and I would be 7 sailors on leave after a couple of glasses of wine. I know it. But you're unabashed about that, and I love that. So, do you find that these women's collectives can be a great support system to you, or do you find them a hindrance because they kind of undermine what your message has been today?
Yeah, I mean, look. First of all, I would never do them at the exclusion of anything else. So yes, I think it's a good thing, but I think you have to be, each, whether it's a mentor or it's your own groups that you belong to different things for different purposes, and so it's not really a good answer, but I personally. So maybe I'll answer with the personal side of it, is that I had a large circle of very successful female friends. I didn't need to go join another group. So, I mean, Friday nights, a few glasses of wine, we beat up on everything that happened that week. I had one friend, if she got a promotion and I didn't have one within 3 weeks of her, I'd throw a friggin' hissy fit. And if I got promoted first, she'd get promoted within 3 or 4 weeks. I mean, we competed so much I decided to marry her brother. And so, so I had that group of female sounding boards, so I didn't go join a public group of female sounding boards. So you make it work whatever way you make it work, but not at the exclusion. I mean, you need to be out there and talking to everybody, because it's it's not just male female, by the way. It's multicultural, right? I mean, if you don't know what to do when you walk in a room with a group of people from X country or Y country or whatever, I mean, you could screw yourself in 5 seconds by doing the wrong thing. Like, try going to Tokyo and walking out of a room and turning your back on 7 people in the room. I mean, you're cooked, because you got to back out of the room, right? I mean, it's those subtleties of understanding. I mean, I don't want to speak for you. I've certainly got way more international experience. But anyway, so not at the exclusion of other things.
So I'm just going to say one thing, because this is what I do for a living. And a women's group will not solve all your problems if you have challenges or concerns, but there are some situations in which it's useful. If you're working in an industry where you don't have a big peer group of women, it can be really helpful for identifying women who are in the same group. For things like mentoring, we have mentoring programs that accomplish different things, so it's an access point for some of those special kinds of connections, and I think that's important. And then I think, we're working on a training initiative, and it's interesting, Charlotte, that you talk about leadership, because we're trying to do a program that's really going to be good for everyone, and it's not only for women, but it's going to be designed with women in mind in terms of the leadership skills, the risk-taking, the things we know that women that sometimes hold them back in terms of their ability to move ahead. So I think that there are specific areas where it can be very useful, but one of the things that we have, the challenges we have, our members are men and women. You cannot speak to the converted, and you can't just club with just women, clubbing with women. And when you're networking at an event, you can't just cluster together, and you have to really, I think, go outside your comfort zone, which is not just, between women and men, different cultural groups, different sectors, and really stretch yourself in terms of getting to know people.
But I think women, I'm a girly girl. I love hanging out with women. I'm on my frickin' LinkedIn Women 2.0. I got all my women contacts, and I would do Women Day events, at least 5 times a year at Oscar. The men would get jealous, so they started doing their own day. Theirs was like going to a strip joint. Ours was like going to the spa. But all good, and was happy to provide that to them. But I just loved always hanging out with girls. Do you know what I mean? That's why I have a lot of girls in the business now. I had lots of girls executives, But for me, the guys hated it, because imagine having a female CEO where the team building day was frickin' the spa, not the golf course. The guys would die, and they'd always say, "Do we have to listen to Sarah McLachlan for 10 more songs on our frickin' spa day?" And I'd be like, "You guys need to get a Thai massage to relax." I'd take them to all this crazy female crap. They'd be going, "Save me, please." I'd be like, "Hey, I have to do golf with Vodafone. You guys can do this crap with me, okay? So I think it's like, I love doing all that stuff. And in LinkedIn, I belong to a lot of the women's groups, and I find it, I find it a safer haven in some cases.
Yes. I think, and I think there's something in that, but I also think too, like for me, there is at times a hesitance to become involved with women's groups because of not, like if you don't know the people that are behind them, if you don't understand what their motivations or agendas are, is it to the exclusion of men? Is it to the exclusion of other groups? What are you going to get out of this? What's the purpose of it? And is it also something like, it's not necessarily that I don't see it like gender divide as an issue. You look around board tables across the country, it's an issue. But is that the best way? Like, I don't know. I guess the question is like, is that the best way for those problems to be resolved? Or is it more through informal networks? Is it, like I've had the privilege of working with people like Sarah Diamond for many years, and it's my personal relationship with her that's helped me understand who, like, to, encourage me and to mentor me going forward. It's more the personal relationships that I see than it is the associations.
But I would say, don't waste your time friggin' learning about golf and football. I mean, I tried that for like 2 years. I was dying. I was like, I can't watch this game for 5 more minutes. So don't try to, like at the end of the day, if they read People magazine, I'm sitting beside them too. I'm like, yeah, that's crazy with Ashton Kutcher and 2.5 Men, And so I've always been very feminine and very female and not been afraid of that and not tried to play in the man's world. I let them play, and then I come in for lunch and I say hello, but I don't have to be side by side at the poker table. I can be at the frickin', hand massage table on the next one.
And that's a really important thing. You have to follow your own interests, and you have to be true to yourself to some degree. I love talking about hockey, and I have a deficit, but I have men at home that
See, they would love you for that.
But that's
I played golf since I was 5. It's not getting any better.
Yeah.
So I grew up in a golf family, and I actually played football in university.
There you go. You see?
But
She's got lots of advantages. I don't have all that.
But I was terrible at both.
Okay, so last question.
All right, thank you. My name is Heather Tay, and I've also been in the mobile industry for many, many, many years, most recently as Vice President of Sales of Nielsen Mobile. And I've really, really enjoyed your talk. It's been so real, so thank you. One of the things that I would like to ask about is about showing your personality at work, but I don't think I need to ask you that because I just have no doubt that that's a real issue, or no, that you don't do that. But the other thing that I'm also very interested in is the extent to which you use intuition at your jobs. So in 2 ways. One, in making business decisions in your work, and the other one in making career decisions over the trajectory of your career. How much have you used intuition, and how open are you with admitting that you do use intuition?
Well, I guess it depends on your definition of intuition. I've always thought of intuition as just cumulative knowledge sparkled with a little bit of a willingness to take risk. So I would say I use intuition a fair amount. Having said that, if anybody who knows me, who's worked with me, I'll freaking crank down on the numbers and analyze the shit out of something before I make an intuitive decision. Except you ask personal versus in work.
Right.
Now, on the personal side, I'm always making impulsive personal decisions. I do that all the time. That's where I get into trouble. So, I don't apply my rules, the same for personal as I do for business, including career choices.
Yeah, I like the analytics. Every morning I wake up, I read our analytics. I love the numbers. I love looking at them. Yeah, I go with gut. I go with instinct. Yeah. But I like to be well informed. Yeah. So I would say it's a good mix. Yep. It's a good mix.
Yeah. I think the converse too is if something doesn't feel right and you can't figure out why, you shouldn't ignore that. It doesn't mean you shouldn't do something. But I guess what, whether it's on the upside or the downside, what I hear is you get that feeling and you have to look deeper with data or more information to see if it's, if there's something to it. But I've, to my peril, if I've had just a gut feeling about something and you think, oh, I'm being silly, I'm being ridiculous, I often find out, unfortunately, long after why it was such a bad idea.
Great, thank you.
Okay, so thank you very much. Our panelists rocked. You guys were the best.
Thank you.
And on behalf of Alex, myself, Janine, thank you very much. Charlotte, Carla, Michelle, and Stephanie, great job. And as one of the audience members said, balls out. I like that. So we'll just continue on with networking right now. We have a really good November event that's coming up as well. It'll be focused on m-commerce, so stay tuned for more details about that event. We'll have some good speakers and a panel set up for that event. So thanks very much for attending, and we'll continue networking right now. Thank you.